I think the thing is, it's like when I mentioned patience before, like I have people, they'll go looking for a deal and 3 months in they're getting a patient and 6 months in they're ready to throw in the towel. It's like, well, okay, so something we've got to work on there anyway. If we put that to the side for a moment anyway, but it's like, how long are you going to hold the dud property? Like how much time are you giving up if you buy a dud and you hold it for 10 and 20 years? Because that's not 6 months of difference at the end of 10 and 20 years. That's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, which if you then equate that to a freedom number, as in how much freedom can that buy you? Well, it's a heck of a lot more than 3 to 6 months. So like anything, it's a long-term thing. You've got to think of the time you put in now, or if you're using a buyer's agent, you're buying their time. The time you're putting in now is an investment in your future. Yes. It is, okay, well, if I put in the time now, and I mean, anyone feel free to get out an Excel spreadsheet on this one. You get $100,000 and you make a spreadsheet where it shows you 10% return, 11% return, 15% return, 20% return. And you'll just see that those exponential differences in those slight returns. It's like, well, if putting in 3 to 6 months now, getting educated, spending a few grand on your education now, enables you to increase or just shift that benchmark just slightly, ever so slightly, a few percent, which I promise you can do a heck of a lot more than a few percent, then that difference to you in 20, 30, 40 years' time is exponential. Yes. It's huge. Yes. But we've just got to get ourselves out of that mindset of thinking 3 months, 6 months. What am I doing this weekend? I don't want to go to an open home this weekend. I looked at properties last weekend. All right, well, the winners are out there doing it. They're not on Netflix. They're out there doing it. They're working. They're putting in the time. They're investing their time to get more later.
100%. And you got to be careful with the smaller margin ones, because they can eventually have a lot of problems and so on. So yeah, finding that right deal is incredibly important, isn't it? And they come around. They do. If you're patient, they will come around.
Oh, 100%. And you're better off, like I've had people say, oh, well, if you're looking for 20% deals, why not just do 2 deals with 10%? It's like, I understand the question, but only a person who's never done a deal will ask that question. Yeah. Because if you do a deal, and I've never had a deal be 10%, but if you do a deal that ends up being fine margin because of something happening, you'll understand you don't want to repeat that process, because this is about creating wealth and creating an amazing life, not just creating money in your bank account. So if while doing this, you feel poor and you have a poor experience of life, well, then what wealth have you really created? And I can promise you, doing multiple 10% deals is going to give you that experience.
You know what's not on the spreadsheet is how much stress goes into that 10% deal, and what that year or two of your life is going to be. And I promise you, once you go through the stress, you realize quickly it's not worth the money. And they won't be back. They won't be back. I don't know. Do you know anyone who actually comes back for multiple 10% deals? See, it doesn't exist.
But the thing is, the trick is, and this is for the newbies, is the story that they will tell is not typically, one of responsibility. I decided to take on these deals because I wasn't patient enough to wait for the great deals, and therefore I burnt myself out. That's not the story they'll tell. The story they'll tell is 20% deals don't exist. Property development or real estate is the problem. The finger will be pointing elsewhere.
I've heard that from agents.
Yeah, it's always the finger is pointed elsewhere, when the truth is they actually just didn't either build the skills to do it or didn't have the patience to do it. Yeah. But you just got to look at the people whose results you want, and make sure you take that advice.
100%.
Yeah.
That's never going to go out of fashion. I mean, the people that are making money for a reason. They've got the experience. They're doing it. Learn from them. Like I said, always. I didn't even. My strategy I've refined in my way. I do it in my way. But I've obviously learnt this from other people, right? I had mentors earlier. I remember sitting next to Steve Waters from Right Property Group. I'd sit next to him at the auction, and he'd be like, "I'm buying this because it's this type of play. I'm buying this because it's that," and that's where I learned. Right? And then I've gone and refined it and done my own little renovation way. And deals are still going to be done long after I'm gone. They were done before me. It's just learning from people that know.
I should say too, just on something I said earlier, so like the appropriate return is dependent on the deal and the complexity and the time.
Explain this.
So good question. Yeah, glad you said that. So if you're doing a deal that's going to take you 3 months, then it doesn't necessarily need to have the same large ROI than a deal that's going to take 18 months, because ROI is really a measure of risk. So if it's a faster deal, you've reduced the risk a bit. So what are faster deals? Okay, cosmetic renovations. Yes. Cosmetic renovations, if you get good at them, you can be in and out of them in a few months. Now, I would never recommend anyone start doing cosmetic renovations for 10 or 12% ROI, but I know people that do it as a business and people that I've coached that do it as a business, and they do 5, 6, 7 of these a year, and they will do them at 10 to 12% margin, but it's because they've refined their system to like a manufacturing line. So they can do it that reliably at 10 to 12%, and they're in and out of them in 3 to 4 months. So in that case there, with that level of skill, they can do that. Starting out, they didn't start there either. They were at 15 to 20%. Because the reality is when you're starting out, when you think it's 15 to 20%, it's probably 10%. So that's why you don't start at 10%.
And that's why you need to learn the spreadsheet. You need to learn the spreadsheet. You need to learn how to do it properly.
Yeah. And then, if we're talking the land game, all right, splitters, where they're already on 2 lots, but on, one title, an example. Okay, you can get in and out of those in 3 to 5 months, sometimes faster with some cool contracts. So you don't necessarily need to get a 20% ROI on that. 15 to 17% is probably okay. Again, people starting out, I'd still suggest 17 to 18% because there'll be things that you will miss because you don't yet know them. But now I would happily do a splitter on 15% because of where my skill set is at, and I know I can get in and out of it in 3 odd months. I mean, the fastest one I've done was 6 weeks. So it does depend on the time. And then there's the reverse, the other end of it, where if people do, they go, subdivision, 20% ROI is what I hear I should do. Okay, but what if there's these people that then go, but I can't reach 20% with the land, so I'm going to go build a house to get the 20%. People will disagree with me on this. I don't then think it's the same thing because you've now just extended the time of the deal as well.